Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you, as always. Thanks for listening. We are starting with, if you're in the Northeast, look outside. That's what we're starting with. Wildfire smoke is getting pretty bad. I don't know if it's having any effect on the voice here today, but it's gotten a little bit better. But the wildfire smoke is not helping, as large swaths of North America are pretty much covered right now with very unhealthy air coming down from wildfires throughout the Canadian province of Quebec, and I believe Ontario a little bit as well. We'll track some of the smoke for you, give you some of all the latest information on that. Meanwhile, Mike Pence delivers a strong rebuke to his former boss, Donald Trump, in a campaign announcement. He's officially throwing his hat in the ring. We'll break that down and analyze if he could actually find some ground of his own and if the rebuke is strong enough to count. Also, a big blow over at CNN as Chris Licht is out. He was the boss that tried to essentially try and bring CNN to, I guess, appeal more to conservatives, try and tone it down a little bit from its kind of pro-Democratic Party heyday in the Trump era. He has been fired. And finally, we'll take a look at a Bryson DeChambeau defending the quote-unquote merger between the PGA Tour and the Saudi LIV golf outfit. Yeah, definitely a pretty interesting thing to have to defend, to be sure. All right, though, we start with this wildfire smoke. It has been a pretty bad situation. Start with some of the, tracking some of the smoke here. This is per the New York Times. Roughly 150. This is a bunch of kind of small fires that have been active in Canada for a few weeks now that have been sending smoke in, various quantities and various severities down south through much of the Northeast and New England parts of the United States. The forecast computer model in the map shows where the thickest smoke is likely to be near the surface of the Earth over the next several hours, which, as you can see, it's kind of coming now, moving in large swaths through, kind of the tri-state area, New York City, Connecticut, specifically Western Connecticut, and a lot of kind of upstate New York, as well as, the Buffalo area as well. And a lot of these fires right now essentially are coming from Quebec. Actually, there's a few in Ontario, but not really very many. Just kind of north of Montreal, Ottawa, Quebec, and Toronto. In a city, right around a city called Lebel-sur-Quevillon and Chibougamau. I guess is how you would pronounce it there. And I think there's one out on Halifax, but a lot of various kind of hot spots in the kind of the forest areas north of the big cities of Canada, and that is really drifting down in a big way just due to kind of like lack of kind of luck of the wind. Really it's kind of a surreal experience. Just I don't know, for me personally, hearing all this time about the fires out in California and talking about it for many times on the show. I've probably done 10 stories about wildfires over the years, just because they are just so consistent every year. There's a massive story about wildfires and things like that. And, there's on social media, there is a fair bit of probably pretty justified, West Coasters being like, oh, this is such a big deal, whatever, yeah, keep whining, because New York City today, due to some of the smoke, I am a little bit north of New York City at the moment, so I kind of got some of the worst of it yesterday, but now it is really getting pretty bad in New York City. Some of the pictures out online are really crazy. I was looking up the sky yesterday. The sun was blood red. It was really just a remarkable thing to see. But again, people in the West Coast have been dealing with that for quite a long time. People, Delhi, India is always like that. But it is really a sign of the times to really show, obviously everybody knows climate change contributing to longer, more severe wildfires for kind of a longer season. Roughly 150 fires were active in Quebec alone, according to Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centers. Many of the fires started days ago, if not weeks, but a storm system swirling off the coast of Nova Scotia in recent days has forced the smoke from these fires south into the United States and then east towards some of the most densely populated areas in the country. The weather pattern is expected to persist for the next several days, with haze likely to continue across the region. So it's not going to go away anytime soon. The level of particulate matter in the smoke was considered unhealthy from Detroit to Philadelphia. But yeah, just some of the things that we've seen, some of the images. If you have not yet, of course, after you're done listening to this podcast, but you just head out online, check out some of the pictures. If you're in the Northeast, you probably don't have to, because you just you probably see them already, and B, you could see them right outside your house. I'm looking at just incredible amounts of haze right now outside of my window. So you can really kind of make clear the problems of it. But there's really been some pretty remarkable effects, especially if we zero in on the city kind of getting the worst of it, as it was blown from kind of northern parts of New York and Connecticut, kind of down essentially the entire state of New York, in kind of a southeastern push from, right where Toronto and Ottawa are, which is essentially just above Buffalo, for those of you trying to get a little bit of remedial geography there. But it does continue to look quite bad, and it does now seems like it's going to continue to get kind of pushed out to sea, and the storm system, which is kind of swirling off kind of the coast of Nova Scotia, right up by kind of Atlantic Canada, is going to continue to have a pretty big impact in terms of pushing this big cloud of smoke right exactly really where you don't want it to go. The sky in New York rapidly darkened on Wednesday afternoon as a plume of smoke from Canadian wildfires that blotted out the sun in upstate New York approached the nation's largest city, plunging Midtown Manhattan into a deep, hazy orange, worsening air quality across the 5 boroughs and canceling some flights even as well. I have a friend who is working at a pretty big New York City insurance firm who was sent home early, kind of given a mask for his commute back home, and it can be kind of a sign of what things are. Mike Hardiman, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Binghamton, New York, is about 60 miles south of Syracuse, pretty close to the border actually with Pennsylvania. So it kind of gives you a sense. This is from the lakes by Buffalo and by Syracuse, all the way down to the Pennsylvania border. We're seeing this kind of haze. He said, quote, "looks like Mars and smells like cigars." So it kind of gives you a sense of what is going on. Because the smell, too, that was some of the stuff I noticed yesterday and was really kind of the worst where I am right now. The smell was really quite remarkable as well. Because it's just like, am I just going crazy, or is something burning? Like, it really does smell that way. And it's just like, I got to get inside. So hundreds of fires, again, burning in eastern Canada for weeks. On Tuesday, as smoke drifted south over parts of the U.S., Northeast, and Midwest. One New York City commuter described the smell as progressing from burnt toast to campfire, which is pretty remarkable. Air quality has remained at its worst since the 1960s, according to the city's health commissioner. City schools were open but not holding any outdoor activities, according to Mayor Eric Adams, and the state was put under a air quality health advisory alert, indicating the index was expected to pass 100. That was going to be in effect until tonight. Currently, right now, I can say that I am in. I think it was where I am right now is like just over 100. I believe is the current AQI for the moment. Which is pretty crazy. I am not in the city. It's 106 right now, as it tries to get now down towards. It seems to get down towards the future. It seems like we're looking a little bit better in the future. But yeah, some of the worst spots right now are pretty much the entire kind of Northeast, from New York to Philadelphia to Washington, D.C., kind of Boston, of course, being left out of it, but it does seem like they're pretty good as D.C. is probably going to be we'll see images of the Capitol tomorrow that look like some of the images that we saw out of New York City today. With that being said, let's go to our next story. Mike Pence is officially in the race. This is from Jonathan Swan in New York Times. Former Vice President Mike Pence announced his presidential campaign in Iowa on Wednesday with the repudiation of Donald J. Trump, portraying his former boss and now rival, as unfit for the presidency and going further than ever before in condemning the character and values of a man he loyally served for 4 years. That's going to be a big thing because a lot of the nation has memories of Trump Pence being just incredibly subservient to Donald Trump at pretty much at all costs. They just postponed the Yankees game. So that gives you a sense of what's going on in New York at the moment. But it does, looking at Pence here, there's no wildfire smoke in Iowa as things get to definitely be heated up. Let's take a listen here to see what Mr. Pence had to say because, he's going to have a lot of institutional kind of memory, just people's memory of him being incredibly subservient to Trump, not really making any kind of clear case against Trump, refusing to condemn him, refusing to invite any sort of attack, just keeping his head down, like kind of frankly, you can all kind of think of the word. It starts with a B. That Mike Pence has been towards Trump, especially since the events of January 6th over the past few years. But now he's in the race, and apparently now all bets are off, similar to the way we saw DeSantis behave, as he has also stepped up his critiques on Trump. And let's see what Pence has got here in this campaign announcement.
And my family, I'm announcing that I'm running for president of the United States of America. January 6th was a tragic day in the life of our nation. The American people deserve to know that on that day, President Trump also demanded that I choose between him and the Constitution. Now voters will be faced with the same choice. I chose the Constitution, and I always will. I believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put them over the Constitution should never be president of the United States again.
Yeah, what took you so long, essentially? Like, what took you so long to say that? It's just like, you've been, like, this happened, like, more than 2 years ago. You've refused to condemn Trump ever since. And now this is, frankly, some pretty mealy-mouthed, 1997 type politician type speak of talking about, I chose the Constitution. You can see if you see the video that he's just looking the most straight-faced, kind of like aggressive, serious look that he could possibly muster, and he just does not look that serious, frankly. Like he's trying to look serious, but he just he's not being aggressive enough. He's not being, hitting Trump really where it hurts. But he's speaking kind of way too abstractly. He's speaking too in a grandiose fashion. I mean, I don't know if this is going to really resonate with the Republican base who loved Trump's kind of cheap talking. He talks like a normal person, frankly. He just talks like the way people talk to each other when they're pissed off. And they want to get an idea across, and they don't want anybody to misunderstand them. Pence is kind of talking about, like he's a professor at Hillsdale College who's trying to be, higher, like talking about the Constitution, trying to be, holier than thou, before God and before country. It's like, he's going to be obviously appealing to, 25% of the Republicans are these hardcore evangelicals. That's definitely going to be his targeted base. And I'm not really too aware of their kind of education status, and a lot of the kind of not less religious educated people are probably be going more towards DeSantis. But I don't know how appealing this is going to. It really seems like if this is your start, you're going to need to ramp it up a little bit more from that if you are Mike Pence. Let's hear what actually Chris Christie had to say. He announced his bid either yesterday or today or something like that.
The more divided we are, the more likely we are to be dominated by a single leader. We cannot sit by and watch this happen. I can't guarantee you success.
But I'm going to go down fighting.
But I guarantee you that at the end of it, you will have no doubt in your mind who I am and what I stand for and whether I deserve it. So that's why I came back to St. Anselm's, and that's why I came back to Manchester, and that's why I came back to New Hampshire to tell all of you that I intend to seek the Republican nomination for President of the United States in 2024, and I want your support.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, crowd reactions here, incredibly lame. Just looking at some of the people, all incredibly old people, probably going to be, essentially most of the Republican base, but all incredibly old people who look relatively bored. But in terms of someone who's definitely knows how to straight talk and is going to be caught up in talking about the Constitution and all this, grandiose type of rhetoric, I think Christie's going to be more effective at it than Pence. But in terms of broad-based appeal, Christie spent the Trump era on ABC News, in pretty essentially utter irrelevance in essentially only in liberal circles. So there's no really one good candidate. DeSantis, I think, is also a bit of a problem as well. There's no one good candidate to take down Trump at the moment. I think it's really clear to see. No other major Republican candidate for president has even mentioned the attack on the Capitol. And that's another thing. The attack, I think nobody cares, especially in the Republican base. Most of the people either think Antifa did it or think it was a good thing that the Capitol was attacked in such a way. The people who are going to be hardcore registered Republican primary voters, they probably, especially that evangelical base, they're like, oh no, I don't like the most they, especially after years of the Republican media hammering their narrative on it, the most you're going to get out of any kind of Republican candidate is going to be, I think maybe they went a little bit too far, but the media overreacted, and they had a right to protest. Essentially, that is what you're going to get. You're not going to get this. Oh, he put the Constitution over the country. Nobody in the Republican base thinks that, and Pence is also essentially asking people to sympathize for Republican primary voters to sympathize for people like Pelosi and AOC who were put in danger by what Trump did. They love that. That is something that is a plus to them if they were put in danger. If Pelosi and AOC, their lives were made worse or they were put in danger in some kind of way. That is something that would be nothing but a plus. So, with that being said, but from Pence, from Christie, all I'm going to say is pretty weak sauce. I am not impressed. All right. Now let's go to our next story. It's Chris Licht in CNN in just a second.
This ain't what you want. Project. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want.
You're listening to Newsflash right here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. Help us grow our audience. Subscribe, rate, and review our show on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a pretty interesting story coming out of CNN. Chris Licht, he is the former television producer who oversaw a brief and chaotic run, in the words of the New York Times, as a chairman of CNN, is out at the network. David Zaslav, the chief executive of CNN's parent, which is Warner Brothers Discovery, said of the decision. He informed staff on Wednesday morning that he had met with Licht and that he was leaving effective immediately. Licht's 13-month run at CNN was marked by one controversy after another. He got off to a pretty bumpy start even before he had officially started, when he oversaw the shuttering of the costly CNN Plus streaming service, which, to be fair, was kind of a Jeff Zucker baby that was never really going to work and was, frankly, just a really, really bad idea, because it's you want more CNN? People are really going to pay for CNN? just looking at it from trying to like pivot to video, like a pivot to streaming or something with the current outlook that they had. I think the new owners had every right to be skeptical, but I think CNN. I mean, maybe you could argue that what they were doing before Chris Licht was smarter business wise, ratings wise, than what they're doing right now, but it does kind of certainly seem like one group was doing something pretty stupid, like the Zucker regime was doing something pretty stupid, and Licht and Zaslav came in and did something just as stupid, but in a different direction. Because they try to come in and say, a great. I didn't read that full Atlantic article that was kind of out over the weekend, which was kind of the tipping point, I think, for him. This is a pretty brutal profile in the Atlantic talking about how delusional Chris Licht was and how everyone hated him, and he essentially thought that there was a great quote that I think really kind of summed up his whole vision. It was like that I, full disclosure, I didn't really read. I saw being shared around on Twitter. I was like, damn, but it was like Chris Licht was like, damn, these right-wing people, they really hate us. They think our journalism is awful. They think we're evil. We really got to focus on appealing to them. It's like, dude, you are missing the point. They are never going to appeal to you. Like, you're never going to appeal to them. They are lost. They hate you with all their guts. Like, they're going to just start turning around and making programming that's going to be going to be good for them. Like, you focus on something else. It's just such a crazy, delusional, kind of misguided thing to do, and a lot of that attempt to appeal to those kind of people who think CNN is the devil, etc., came through trying to essentially, at least in the view of the CNN journalists at the outlet, hold them back in interviews with Republican politicians, not be so kind of openly partisan, and really challenge GOP guests less than they otherwise would have, which really was, by all accounting, what kind of pissed the journalists off the most. But yeah, CNN Plus started off pretty bad. Scores of layoffs because of that. And as Zaslav said on this, for a number of reasons, things didn't work out. And that's unfortunate, Zaslav said, according to a recording of his remarks. It's really unfortunate, and ultimately, that's on me. And I take full responsibility for that. Nothing to me is just more annoying, I'm sorry, than some boss or some authority figure being like, oh, I take full responsibility for that, when everyone knows the person will not suffer in any way and will continue to do exactly what they were doing before and will not face any consequences for making the mistake that they said they're going to make. So it's like, if you're taking full responsibility, why is Chris Licht out and not you too? Like, it's just such pandering and just insulting to whoever is listening's intelligence. This job was never going to be easy, especially at a time of great disruption and transformation. He continued, Chris poured his heart and soul into the job. Like all of you, he was in the line of fire, and he's taken a lot of hits. Probably a reference to that profile I referred to in the Atlantic that really kind of voiced his colleagues and his underlings' mass dislike of him. So that is for sure. But he appointed a group of interim leaders, the CNN veterans Amy Antalis, Virginia Mosley, and Eric Sterling, as well as the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, David Levy, who is widely viewed to be someone who is essentially Zaslav's representative. Licht's departure represents a dramatic fall not long after he departed as an executive producer of Stephen Colbert's top-rated late-night show, who, by the way, he essentially made, I don't know if he was there at the time that, I'm assuming he was there at the, right at the beginning when Colbert was really floundering, and then Trump comes along. He was like, okay, rag on Trump every night, make jokes about Trump every night, be the official kind of, make it all about politics, make it all about kind of anti-Trump, and that took off for Stephen Colbert. It was a great strategy, and it was the same thing really CNN was doing at the same time, and then Chris Licht comes in and said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. It was a very kind of funny way of looking at things, to say the least. When Licht took the job, he told friends it was a calling. Whoever says that their job is a calling, unless they're, really, really good, I feel like that is a red flag. If you're saying, especially in politics, you're saying, oh, it's a calling. I'm doing this because it's a calling. Like, that is a huge sign that something is not going up to snuff. So the job would prove much more difficult. Ratings plummeted during Licht's management and a series of programming miscues, including an ill-fated morning show co-anchored by Don Lemon, who was somebody who really just was a pest to all those around him, apparently in the workplace for many, many years. Again, some of these things do kind of go definitely before the Licht era that kind of came to a head when he was in charge. But another big one was the ill-fated town hall featuring former President Donald Trump that was subject to pretty withering criticism. Did little to shore up support with his colleagues. I personally think, with the CNN, the town hall, that was relatively interesting. It was definitely a loss for CNN in that they essentially stacked it all with Trump supporters, which was pretty stupid. Just at least do it with, Republican, mainstream Republicans, not just diehard. Well, obviously those are mainstream Republicans, but just some Republicans and some make it like reflective of the electorate or something like that. It was just really kind of a stupid move, which invalidated all the work that Caitlin Collins was trying to do in terms of interviewing. But the principle and the way CNN handled it was, I don't think, the worst, but they essentially just let it get out of control because of the fact that they stacked the audience in Trump's favor, which is really pretty stupid. Meanwhile, of course, you got the Atlantic profile and the financial performance, which was probably a pretty big deal in and of itself. The network generated $750 million in profit last year, including one-time losses from the CNN streaming service, CNN Plus streaming service, which is down $1.25 billion from the year before, which is pretty bad. In Licht's abrupt departure, earlier reported by Puck, represents the latest hit in a tumultuous era for the network. This is obviously in the wake of the firing of Chris Cuomo and Jeff Zucker. It did not help matters for Licht that Mr. Zucker enjoyed wide loyalty from top anchors as well as rank-and-file workers. Even after his exit, once employees began siring on Licht, Zaslav turned into a quasi-grievance switchboard for frustrated staff members. One of Licht's first big programming moves was to reassign Lemon from his primetime perch to a new morning show. Licht, by the way, he essentially made CBS This Morning, too, which is one of the best morning shows, most successful morning shows in the business, which is pretty surprising how badly he screwed this one up, because he put Lemon with Harlow and Caitlin Collins that would set the tone for the news organization. It was marred, though, by low ratings and tensions on and off the set. 2 months after Lemon said that a woman over the age of 50 was, quote, not in her prime, in reference to Nikki Haley, and he was fired, effectively blowing up the show that had been Licht's signature project. Licht also apparently took his time, executives believe far too much time, to figure out a primetime lineup as it was rapidly losing viewers. To the shock of many CNN staff members, the network began to lose occasionally to Newsmax, which is got to be pretty embarrassing in primetime. All right, so we move on now from this very well-reported, by the way, media story to our last story. And this has to do with golf. Not something I thought I'd be talking about, but it does also have to do with Saudi Arabia. The PGA Tour, pretty much the thing that makes you want to groan whenever it comes on the TV. But it is probably one of the most popular sports with, 50-plus-year-old, white dads, that at least I have seen throughout my life. That will now be officially owned essentially by Saudi Arabia. They said that they were doing a merger, but as the details became clear, it was essentially clear that Saudi Arabia had engaged in a hostile takeover of the PGA Tour, which had really been a golf institution and really kind of an American institution as well. Something that really kind of remained pretty independent, even as the LIV Tour, which is part of the Saudi Arabian government's efforts towards sports washing, was kind of bringing, associating their government not with human rights abuses, not with, radical Islam and, just incredible war crimes all across the globe, and also, by the way, spiking oil prices, just for the hell of it. But instead, the golf and we got Ronaldo too, and we also got an F1 race, I think is another thing. They also do wrestling or something like that. They got all these different little tendrils everywhere to try and make their regime essentially look better, and kind of covering up some of the really awful stuff that they've been doing over the years. That is the big purpose of it. They've started as a LIV golf tour, which attracted, I think the first big name was Phil Mickelson. They're paying hundreds of millions of dollars to these golfers that definitely would not see anything like that in the PGA, but then you're going to go work for an oppressive backwards regime. That really pissed the PGA off. That pissed a lot of people off. Golfers in the PGA, executives in the PGA, but just people who stayed. They went to bat. I think they were suing the LIV Golf Tour for a time, and then all of a sudden we found out yesterday they're just going to get bought out, really by everyone at the LIV Golf establishment. So Bryson DeChambeau is one of the PGA LIV Golf Tour partnership. Just how this deal came together, I think, would be very interesting to further get into. It's really a kind of pretty embarrassing moment just generally for golf, though, when it comes down to it, because you look at, this is the head of the PGA essentially admitting, this guy's name is Pat Monahan, I believe, and he essentially just come out and say, when you essentially have to come out and admit, by the way, this writer for ESPN compares it to Alabama football coach Nick Saban taking the Auburn job. Just really remarkable. PGA Tour players, some of the biggest stars, kept in the dark. And this guy Monahan goes, I recognize that people are going to call me a hypocrite, which, by the way, when you have to say that, you just have to admit that you're essentially being undeniably hypocritical. It is, it's going to be a pretty rough time for you out in the press. Anytime I said anything, I said it with the information that I had at the moment, and I said it based on someone that's trying to compete for the PGA Tour and our players. I accept those criticisms, but circumstances do change. I think that in looking at the big picture and looking at it this way, that's what got us to this point. But apparently, sources told ESPN on Tuesday that this deal came together very quickly. PGA Tour Policy Board Chairman Ed Hurley. I'm just going to call Hurley. This is a really weird spelling of the name, but I'm just calling it Hurley. And board member Jimmy Dunn, who is well connected in the golf world, helped lay the groundwork for the agreement and set an initial meeting with the Saudi side, the LIV side, Yasir Al-Rumayyan, the governor of Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, which is essentially the vehicle for the Sovereign Wealth Fund to put money into various properties and companies and things like that. In a video conference with reporters, Monahan said the PGA Tour had been in talks with the Public Investment Fund for about 7 weeks. There are 4 in-person meetings as well as video conferences and telephone calls. Monahan said an agreement was reached on Monday night. On CNBC on Tuesday, Rumayyan said that he met Monahan in London recently. They had lunch, played golf the next day, and had lunch again. Monahan said the policy board had to approve the matter formally. It should be finalized in a matter of weeks. Again, how did they get to the PGA? That is the question everyone wants to know. In October, Phil Mickelson, again, who is firmly on Team LIV, said the PGA Tour and LIV needed to come together. Monahan told ESPN at President's Cup in Charlotte that would never happen. When Monahan asked if the circuits could coexist, he said, I provide the same answer. They've gone down their path, and I think we've been pretty consistent about the path we are going towards. Sources told ESPN the PGA Tour and LIV Golf has spent tens of millions of dollars defending themselves in a federal antitrust lawsuit that LIV Golf and 11 of its players filed against the PGA Tour in August. The PGA filed a countersuit claiming LIV Golf interfered with contracts with its players. On Friday, the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Ninth Circuit in California denied the PGA Tour's motion to dismiss LIV Golf's appeal over sovereign immunity. The case would have likely dragged out now for several months more, if not a couple of years. Neither side wanted to share its secrets via required discovery, and neither wanted to keep spending money on lawyers, so this could have been an easy way to get around it. But how was the deal so favorable to LIV is a real question. Maybe it's just because they have more money. Anyway, we will kind of find out more about this as the time goes on. Yeah, it could, but the early speculation is to kind of get around the lawsuits. All right, but let's get in this interview here. This is, I believe, Erin Burnett talking to, or another CNN woman talking to Bryson DeChambeau.
Well, Caitlin, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I think
Caitlin Collins.
There's a lot more behind closed doors that's been going on. What I can tell you is that H.E. Yasser has always been a staunch supporter of golf globally and wanting to grow the game. That's been his vision from the start. When we first started talking a few years ago. And as it's come to fruition now, I think that this is the best thing that could ever happen for the game of golf. And I'm extremely proud to be a part of that because of the fact that the fans are going to get what they want. The players are going to experience something a little different, a little new on the PGA Tour side. But I truly believe in the end, the game of golf wins in this scenario.
What about for those players, though, who stuck with the PGA Tour, who didn't accept a lot of money that was coming their way from the LIV Tour because of comments from people like Monahan and the criticism you faced? Do you see Pat Monahan, or as Jay Monahan, I should note, as a hypocrite in this situation?
Well, look, I really feel bad for the information that was delivered to the players on the PGA Tour, the ones that stuck with them. We did take a risk. The players that did go over, we did take a risk, and there was a reason.
And he went over early in February of 2022.
For taking that risk relative to the capital that had to be paid out for that to occur. But I do feel bad for the PGA Tour players because they were told one thing and something else happened. And on our side, we were told one thing and it's come to fruition. And look, in the end, for me, I want the players, the fans, and the game of golf to win. And, it does stink a little bit from my perspective that the PGA Tour players are not necessarily winning. I hope that they can find a way to make sure that they are valued in the same way that we are over at LIV. And I think that'll happen. It's just going to take some time with the players pushing back a little bit and trying to figure out what makes them what gives them the best opportunity to be successful on their own end. And eventually we all come back together now and play as one group. I think that's the best thing, watching us play week in and week out, the best players against each other.
When you say bad information, what do you mean?
Well, look, there's a lot of information that can be delivered on both sides. Now, whether it's right or wrong is always subject to what people believe. And, behind closed doors, there was a lot going on that anyone could really take in. And a lot of players just weren't willing to take the risk, whereas players like myself had some decent information and was willing to take that risk because
the decent information, by the way, was
it
money.
would change our lives, but
all
it would
money.
Potentially change the landscape of the game of golf, of which we all believed in, the guys that went to LIV for a long time. Phil being in the same position, we all believed that there was a better path to potentially grow the game and give people a new viewpoint and fresh perspective on the game of golf. And I think that's what you're seeing here now, is that it's finally coming to a place where the PGA Tour realized it, LIV realized it, we all realized that we're better together and not apart.
Well, of course, one thing that's not behind closed doors, which we do know, is that the LIV Tour is backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which, of course, is run by and backed itself by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Because of this, that is why it has earned so much criticism, including from the families of 9/11 victims. And the group put out a statement today saying, quote, the PGA and Monahan, referring to the commissioner, appeared to have become just more paid Saudi shills, taking billions of dollars to cleanse the Saudi reputation. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think we'll never be able to repay the families back for what exactly happened just over 20 years ago. And what happened is definitely horrible. And I think as time has gone on, 20 years has passed, and we're in a place now where it's time to start trying to work together to make things better together as a whole. I have deep sympathy. I don't know exactly what they're feeling. I can't ever know what they feel, but I have a huge amount of respect for their position and what they believe. Nor do I ever want anything like that to ever occur again. I think as we move forward from that, we've got to look towards the pathway to 9/11 to occur again. Especially in forgiveness, especially if we're trying to mend the world and make it a better place. I think this is what they're trying to accomplish. LIV is trying to accomplish.
Let's rewind that back.
Nor do I ever want anything like that to ever occur again. I think as we move forward from that, we've got to look towards the pathway to peace. especially in forgiveness, especially if we're trying to mend the world and make it a better place.
He is just essentially coming out and saying there, we need to work for a path to forgiveness on 9/11. Ask the Saudis what they think of that. That would be a really interesting one. For those of you who don't know, anyway, 15 out of 19 hijackers were from the kind of Saudi state, came from Saudi Arabia, and there were some ties, shall we say, with the big man up top.
They're trying to accomplish, LIV is trying to accomplish, the PIF is trying to accomplish, we're all trying to accomplish is a better world for everybody and a way to provide great entertainment for everybody around the world.
It's all about providing great entertainment.
Does it make you uncomfortable at all? Because it's not just that. They're accused of financing terrorism. They also are accused of killing a Washington Post reporter, Jamal Khashoggi. How do you feel knowing that is where the money is backed by?
Look, it's unfortunate what has happened, and that's something I cannot necessarily speak on as I'm a golfer, but what I can say is that what they're trying to do, what they're trying to work on is to be better allies, because we are allies with them. And look, I'm not going to get into politics of it. I'm not specialized in that, but what I can say is they are trying to do good for the world and showcase themselves in a light that hasn't been seen in a while. And nobody's perfect.
That is for sure. Nobody's perfect. And on that note, we are going to end. We'll be back on Friday.